just did the countdown.
Love Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. This is your sweet Dr. Danny J, and it is Legals Wednesdays, and I am here with my male alter ego, as always, the Joe. I cannot use the middle initial, Weeks.
Good evening. How are you?
I am absolutely fabulous. And we have, I'm going to brace myself.
The smartest person in the world.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, we have other guests here today.
She was not
talking about
you, Mr. Weeks.
No, I'm talking about the other guests.
We have the Alice Rodriguez.
Hello.
I didn't say your whole government name.
No, don't say my government name.
Just government name.
We only got an hour.
Partials.
It's Miss Alice K.B. Rodriguez.
You still didn't get it right, but that's okay.
Alice K.F.B. Rodriguez.
That was close, but that's okay. You don't need to tell him the whole name.
Make a trip.
That's a part of it. But the rest of it, I'm keeping a secret. Let's keep it a secret. Since you can't say Mr. Weeks' middle initial, and obviously I'm not going to be allowed to, then you don't get to tell my whole government name.
Doesn't it sound pretentious when people have, like, a lot of names?
No, it sounds like your parents really loved you, that they wish they'd had so many more. And so they just gave you the name for every child they wish they had. At least that's what my mom and daddy told me.
They were having no more babies.
I was number 10. They saved the best for last.
Were you really number 10?
I'm the 10th of my parents' 10 children.
I'm number 8.
You're number 8?
Yeah.
8 is a good number. Yeah.
Not
as good as 10, but 8 is a good number.
No, I think my parents were disappointed. I think they wanted
I was number 2 of 3, everybody.
Well, Danny, what number were you?
2.
Number 2. All right.
My parents had 9 children. 7 were adopted. They could not get anybody to take the other 2.
See, he has you going. I keep telling you about going one step too far. You always think it's just that little step. It's like poking the bear.
Well, he was the only one who was really adopted.
We're talking about legal. We got legal Wednesday today.
What are we doing?
What
are we talking about today? Why am I here? I was just drafted. What am I doing here?
Okay.
I came to Mr. Weeks' office to do some work with him today, and now I'm on a radio show. It only happens with Joe Weeks.
We begged you.
We did, and it is a blessing from amongst But can you give us a little background of yourself?
Yes, well, I'm an attorney. I have done that for many years. I've been a trial lawyer for many, many years, which is actually how I met Mr. Weeks over a decade ago. We ended up in a courtroom together with 2 clients who turned out to be mutual for us, and Mr. Weeks just bedazzled me with his expertise. And apparently the jury liked us trying a case together.
I think so.
Yeah. So we've continued to do business since that time. I specialize in what's called family law, although I do some business litigation and whatever else Mr. Weeks will let me do with him.
That came out wrong. In the legal field. In the legal field.
See, that's because I have to fish y'all's mind out of the gutter. I said it with such innocence, nobody could have any other implications unless their mind was in the wrong place.
You got to understand, I've known Alice Rodriguez for a long time. She is truly a brilliant lawyer, a brilliant woman, but she is a religious nut. So,
well, you know what? I would rather be a religious nut. I would rather be a religious nut than, let's see, what other nuts are there out there?
Well, my point was...
Than a worldly nut?
My point was that...
There was no point.
Anybody that thought anything differently I can dispel you of those ideas right now.
Well, let me dispel your audience of any myths that I'm a religious nut. I happen to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and that God raised him from the dead, and that as a result of that belief, I have eternal life. And in believing that, it's not a matter of religion, it's a matter of my spiritual beliefs.
Like I said,
and one day, Joe Weeks, I'm going to get you to receive Jesus Christ as the Son of God.
No, I'm not being critical. I'm just explaining your personality.
Well, because you're not critical.
I'm not critical.
That's why I'm telling you, you got 24 months before I bring you in.
I'm respectful. Okay.
I'm
24 months. You better have all the fun you want to have.
Okay. Okay, everybody.
Oh, if the audience could see his face now. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Both our listeners are going, what are they talking about?
All two of them.
We heard about wills last week. What is this?
Okay, so what are we talking about today from a legal perspective?
Well, from the legal perspective, I would like to go ahead and start because something that is heavily done nowadays is the fact that a lot of domestic situations, people call the law, and they use it as a weapon nowadays. The police, instead of to honor and protect, they're used as the go-between and the weapon in a lot of situations. So what I would like to do today is if you can give a little bit, Ms. Rodriguez, just give us a little bit of background about how you work in the domestic field as far as family law. And then we are going to bring in Mr. Weeks. I love it when he looks at me like that. Gives me chills. We want to find out exactly what, when we have to do the expungement and the dismissal and the going to court and the aftermath when the cloud clears and when the smoke clears.
Can you first set it up though in this respect?
The number to call if you have any domestic relation questions is 347-539-5685. Once again, that is 347-539-5685. Get your domestic questions live on the air.
I think Alice would agree with me that the most contentious and litigious area of the law is domestic relations. It's frankly why I won't do it. I just don't have the patience and probably not the intellect to do it. It's amazing to see really nice human beings and very spiritual people like Alice Rodriguez really take care of our clients. But it's the most difficult portion of the law. I can't imagine dealing with a client she deals with day in, day out, because frankly, when I'm dealing with clients, it's usually about money. And money has a little emotional attachment, but not a great deal. But I always say that when you have clients in a contested divorce, that means there's at least one crazy person, at a minimum. Otherwise, it would be uncontested. But speak to that.
Well, first of all, what we do have to acknowledge is that now in society, you have people getting divorced at the rate of about 50%. And when you talk about family law, though, it's not just about divorce. You're talking about custody issues. You're talking about child support issues. Adoption is a very pleasant area of family law, and it can include some aspects of estate planning. So it's not just about divorce. It's paternity actions when children are born out of wedlock. It's legitimacy actions when children are born out of wedlock. However, what Danni was talking about really is the family violence aspect of divorce that ultimately may lead to some kind of criminal involvement.
Can I ask you both a question as women more so than as legal people? And I could be way off on this, but I think I'm right. Do you believe, like I do, that in almost every relationship, let's say every relationship, there are times when things occur that could be classified as violent?
In all relationships? Yeah. Well, to say all would be reaching a little.
That's a good point.
However, I will say that probably in lengthy marriages, you will rarely have a marriage that's lasted for a substantial period of time where there has not been a little bit of physical altercation.
I mean, something just, maybe major to some people, pushing, shoving.
I've seen that. I've seen where perhaps she's decided she's not going to let him leave. She takes his keys.
That's
he shoves
common.
past her. He's trying to get away. She
right.
doesn't want him to get away. And let me also say this. Domestic violence is not just limited to men against women. I've handled cases over the years where they've been very violent women. I've had male clients who reluctantly admitted that their wives beat them up. And so it's not one-sided.
Most men, me included,
Here we go.
believe that. I think women are more violent than men. Believe me, y'all are.
Here we go.
Man, y'all off the chain. Honey, no, I'm serious. 'Cause I came home last week. I told Lakeisha I've been to the library all night. And she wants to get.
It would be more believable if he could read a lot.
But here's the point: women are just as violent, and most men have had relationships where women were violent. But men always get tagged for it in the system. I mean, it's just true. I've seen this, and you have too. We had a client where the woman goes over to her boyfriend's apartment, breaks in, breaks stuff, calls the police. They come arrest the boyfriend, take him out of his apartment, take him to jail, leave the girlfriend there.
Well, you know why that happens, right?
Why?
Because the woman is more intelligent in how she plans it.
Sometimes that's true.
That's right. The man is typically responding from and having been set up position. But most women, when they engage in that kind of conduct, they've given it some thought. They may be in a rage, but they've pondered on it for some time. They've already known for a while that he was seeing someone else. They've already played over in their minds what they were going to do. So by the time they get there, he's been set up. And so it looks a little bit like he was the aggressor because that's how she intended it. Now, let me roll back and just say this.
Please.
From a spiritual perspective,
the number to call is
most often the woman is going to be the weaker vessel. Even if she's the physical aggressor, our lung capacity is not as great as that of men. That's from a physical perspective. But from a spiritual perspective, the Bible says that we're the weaker vessel. I like to say the more delicate vessel, which means that any man with one iota of intelligence should be able to engage in enough logical thought that he doesn't have to be physically violent with a woman. The bottom line is, most times, if the man doesn't walk away, he's going to get tagged for it. I say to my male clients all the time, do not let her get you alone. I don't care how passionate you are about her. I don't care how much you love her. If there is discord between the two of you, if you're already separated, if there's a pending divorce, I don't care how many times she texts you. I don't care how much you want to make love to her. Stay away from that woman. Now, of the percentage of times, ask me how many times they still go back and they get tagged.
How many times do they still go back and get
Well,
tagged?
if I tell them on a scale of 1 to 10, absolutely stay away, 8 times out of 10 they go back.
That sugar's a powerful thing.
No comment. Well, you ought to know, Mr. Weeks, you're married.
From a spiritual standpoint, I just think that women are more conniving, and I can give you the best example I can think of. Hey, Adam, you want an apple?
So you're going to quote the Bible, right?
Okay, honey.
One quoting.
This snake,
I told you, I'm getting him closer and closer to getting things out of the Bible.
This snake came by and left this fruit for you, Adam. Okay, honey, if that's all you made for dinner.
The problem was Adam abdicated his leadership responsibility. If he had been leading the way God ordained him to lead, then he would have been having the conversation with the serpent, not Eve. But because he was guilty of laziness and he was just hanging out in the garden, sleeping and eating fruit, and this woman was inquisitive, he didn't lead. If he had led, we wouldn't be here having this discussion today.
Sweet Danny J, can I ask you a question?
I am being so.
Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever brought something up and immediately wish you had not? Because before I got through saying that, I'm going, God, Joe, shut up. This is not going to end well.
It's a train wreck. Everybody knows watching it.
We're talking about domestic relations, right? Let me say this, though, on a serious subject. Domestic relations is a very serious matter, and quite frankly, it extends to the entire family. It's not just the husband and the wife. If children are being mistreated by either parent, a mother could be physically overly aggressive with her daughter, and a child has the right to pursue a restraining order or a domestic violence order against a parent, and they can do it through either of the parents. So if I'm separated from my spouse...
I did not know that.
Yes. The family violence statute allows a child to bring a request for a restraining action in a civil proceeding against either parent, and that typically the parent is bringing the action on behalf of the child. So it's a serious situation. And we're joking about it now, but let me just say this. We're not giving any direct legal advice on this show, so don't take anything that we say and govern your life by it and subsequently come back and say, I heard on Sweet Danny J's show that this is what I could do. You'd have to get a specific consultation to address that issue. However, what I will say is a civil domestic violence situation can ultimately be elevated to a felony situation. And so anytime a man or a woman picks up the phone and they make allegations of domestic violence, they have to understand that once it gets in the system, you don't really control that animal anymore.
Let me ask you that question, because I think that's the most misunderstood part of not just this, but a lot of legal matters. Woman typically files this domestic violence action and then says, you know, I've decided to drop this. Yeah, doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't, especially if it's been elevated to a criminal matter, whether it's a criminal misdemeanor or a felony. Then you have started in motion wills that you don't get to stop.
You're a witness.
You're a witness at that point. The state could decide that this was egregious enough, it was horrific enough, her black eye, the fact that it's happened over and over is egregious enough that they are going to prosecute that man whether or not now the two of you reconciled, you've got counseling. And this is especially causes me anguish in Christian families, because I think people tend to think that people who are believers don't have domestic challenges. They do. They have, just because they received Jesus Christ doesn't mean that they still don't have a temper, a lack of patience, that they're not growing in areas. And sometimes there needs to be a 24 to 48 hour cool-off period. I tell people in your domestic life, please just strive not to say anything or separate from each other for 24 to 48 hours before striking out or saying something. Because when you start the wheels in motion, then somebody is going to end up in front of you, Joe, looking for another attorney who is also taking money out of that family home that should be going to those children to defend them now in a criminal case.
Well, I think the other thing that people don't realize is once you have been convicted of domestic violence, you're on the registry.
Yeah.
You can't go, for an example, to the White House. If you go with a tour group with your church, happened to a friend of mine.
Yep.
Church is going to the White House. No, Mr. So-and-so can't go. We had a domestic violence a few years ago.
And he and his wife may have reconciled.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and kind of forgot all about it.
Yes.
But I guess the takeaway is understand that it may feel really good to put that man or woman in jail overnight. But the other thing is, in today's world, with background checks being what they are, unless that person is extremely well established in their career, you have just cost that person the ability to earn a decent living for the rest of their life.
Yes, you impact their jobs and everything. And any lawyer that I know who specializes in family law, they will not file a domestic violence petition lightly. I know I don't.
Right.
In 26 years of practice, I have never had someone walk into my door and I not do a thorough investigation and say there is really a need here. And typically, even when I do it, I'm not looking to destroy that person. I'm still hoping that we can work this out.
Right.
And if they get a decent lawyer on the other side, we can potentially create a scenario for this family to have a reconciliation plan, especially if they're children. Even if the husband and wife don't come back together, there's still going to be children that they have to have a relationship with. And so no lawyer who really specializes, and people who do family law and who do it for a lot of years, Joe, they have to have a heart. They really have to have a heart for people. I don't know many family law attorneys who really just don't care about their clients. If they ever get to that point, they're usually close to retirement. Mm-hmm. They usually really care about what they do. They understand that there's going to be a significant impact. And I'm just thankful to say that after all the years of doing this, I've had families come back to me and say, thank you for the way you handled it. I've met people at the courthouse who said, you don't remember me, do you? You know, you handled my case 15 years ago, and my wife and I got back together. Those are the stories that give you the...
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for that. And I couldn't do family law, so I'm very respectful of those people who can. But I do see a lot of the fallout in my practice. And I do see a lot of people who go back and 15 years later, and frankly, what I find is most of these people that really mess it up do it on their own. They go down to the courthouse and they go, I'll teach that person a lesson. And then they, as you mentioned, they start the ball rolling, and you can't stop it.
The other thing, too, is we really, I say all the time, should make it a lot more difficult to get married and make it a lot easier to get unmarried or divorced.
Here's my idea.
What's your idea?
You get your marriage license when you get your driver's license, and they both expire after 5 years. You got to go renew them because most people wouldn't renew.
Yeah, but by that time there are children involved, and there are financial issues involved. You don't test drive a marriage.
Those are still involved whether you're divorced or whether you're married or whether your license expired. Just seems to me.
Well, we have a different perspective, and that perspective comes from our spiritual beliefs. And my spiritual belief is that marriage is ordained by God and that you should not enter into that kind of covenant lightly. Roll your eyes all you want to. But I notice that you're still married after 20-plus years, right?
I can't afford to leave. Good Lord,
and if
I
you
would.
try to leave her, I'm going to represent her.
She's got that job at the Waffle House. She works a swing shift on
Just
Monday,
know
Wednesday,
that
Friday.
I am going to be her lawyer, and we're not asking for
that's
half.
Exactly right.
We're taking all of it.
No, that's exactly right. That's why I couldn't get a divorce. Somebody like you would take everything I want.
We are taking it all.
I'd be
Because
lucky
for
just
her
to get away with
to
giving
put
it all.
up with you, for her to put up with you for almost 30 years,
Luckiest woman in the world.
that is hard times.
Maybe she just lived in her past life and deserves it. You don't know.
No, maybe you did something in your past life to deserve to be married to someone that you can't walk away from.
The number to call. The number to call is 347.
So in any event, you can't test drive a marriage, okay? You can't test drive a marriage. You're either going to marry or you're not.
People do it all the time. You mentioned earlier, 1 out of 2 ends in divorce.
Yeah,
People
but and look at what has happened. There's been an erosion in society because the very thought process that you're promoting right now has perniciously penetrated families. And now people think that marriage is something to be considered lightly. And I am of the belief that no one comes out without there being blood on the floor. And then you've got to figure out how to clean up the blood. And too often it's children's blood who's on the floor. And so it should be more difficult to get married. You should have to go through a course for a year. You should have to get mentoring and coaching.
Okay, I'll give you the basis of that course. My nephew's 27, just became a lawyer. Great job. He's in love with a woman.
Good for him.
He's talking about marriage.
Oh, wait.
And he came to me because he knows that I know about relationships.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, son, if you
Leave
want to
her
get
now.
married, here's what you need to do. You need to try it for a while.
Oh, no.
And here's what you need to do.
Oh, no.
For the next year, give 65% of every dime you make to somebody you hate, and that'll be just like it'll be when you're married after a couple of years.
Wait
So
a minute.
If you want to test drive it or try it
You
out,
hate?
that's what you do. Well, ultimately, that's what all people do.
Well, he's saying that divorce ultimately leads to hate. However, you have to understand that Joseph Ashley Weeks is just being intellectual.
And
I said your middle name. I'm sorry.
His own
Ashley?
name.
I'm sorry, Ashley.
No,
I'm sorry.
Give 80% of your income to somebody you hate, and you'll find out what marriage is really like. That's all.
See, he's not talking divorce. He's saying marriage. He's saying give 80%
Well, ultimately,
to somebody that you hate.
right.
Well, see, Joe, here's the thing.
Yeah.
You say that because you do not believe that marriage is an honorable estate. I do. And here's what I also believe. Anything
Yes, ma'am.
that is truly valuable can only be bought with blood or love. It cannot be bought with money.
Oh, that's a tweet.
You can give me all of the money that you have, but if I don't love you, and if I am not blood bought, sold out to you, I will take your money, shake the dust off my feet, and keep walking.
You're like my first wife.
It is only love or blood that binds people together.
All right, and that is why doing family law is so difficult, because people are so emotionally invested
Yes.
with that.
Yes.
And because the law has evolved to the point that men get so royally screwed in
Not
the process.
true.
Oh, it is true.
Not
You
true.
know,
I
it's
have men
true.
who get alimony from their wives.
Well, it's so rare. It's so rare that
Well,
it shocks.
that's not because men are getting stiffed. It is because society has, for whatever reason, been set up in such a way that men make the larger share of the income.
Because they
you
work
and I
harder.
can do the same job. No, that's because the wives work just as hard, but they're doing the grunt work of having your babies, raising your children, washing your dirty underwear, while you go to work and wink at the secretary.
That's about an hour a day.
That is absolutely. Putting up with you is much more difficult than that.
Please.
So, when women make the same or greater income as men, you find women paying alimony. I have women who pay child support that I represent. I have men who get alimony from their former wives that I represent. It is not a matter of gender anymore. I can tell you the courts are transitioning out of that. There was a time.
Okay.
There was absolutely a time where if you were a man, it did not matter. You were going to be sacked with a greater burden and responsibility. But organizations like Fathers or Parents Too have sprung up, and men have advocates now that are just as intense as do women, and that's changing. The gender bias in the court system is changing. No longer can a woman walk into my door and think that just because she stayed at home, she's going to get alimony. The question is, are you educated? Do you have the ability to earn income? Are all of the children gone? I hope I'm not giving you all of the facts that you're going to need for having to
I'm taking this in, honey. I'm going, okay. I'm better off than I thought.
Because women who've been married longer now, especially if they've gotten a couple of college degrees, the worst thing an older woman wants, who is now in her 50s or 60s, is to have her husband walk in and say, I'm leaving you. Because at most, she is not going to get alimony or support, especially if the kids are grown. They may equally or equitably, because Georgia's what's known as an equitable division property.
We have a call.
Oh, great. It doesn't mean 50-50. It means what's fair based on the facts. And any good lawyer can make a case for fairness for the male as well as the female, then it's going to be based on what is equitable under the circumstances. And I say to any woman, if you've been married for 30 years and you're in your 50s and 60s, I've had a judge say to me on the bench when I said about one of my female clients, I said, Your Honor, she's 57 years old. She can't go out and get a new job, start a career, blah, blah, blah. And you know what the judge said to me? A female judge. She said, Alice, if I could do it and you could do it, she could do it.
Good judge.
And what I said to the judge was, Your Honor, you and I have doctorate degrees. It's a lot easier for us. My client doesn't have a doctorate. So, but if a woman has a degree and she's well educated, she's in her 50s, 60s, and her husband comes in and say, you know what, I love you, but I'm done. I don't want to live this way anymore. As a matter of fact, my advice to all women in their 50s and 60s when they come to me is I tell them to go home and reinvent themselves and do everything you can to make sure that you fight for him. That's what I tell them, because you're not likely going to get alimony. The children are grown, and do you want to start over?
I think my perspective just improved. That's good advice. If that's Lakeisha on the phone.
Okay, let's talk to our caller.
Tell them at the library.
Oh, did they hang up? Well, we got so intense. Please call back. Please call back. Mr. Weeks is sitting here looking at me with his mouth open.
5685. This is actually an awesome conversation. 347-539-5685. You can also find us on Skype. One of the things that I wanted to go back to that you hinted on earlier was that women aren't always the victims in domestic violence situations.
No, I didn't say they were always the victims.
Right, that's what I was, yeah. So what I wanted to ask was, can you give us a scenario where a man can feel confident that, you know, that he can say that this woman keeps hitting me and beating me?
Absolutely. First of all, what I say to a man is you have to understand that if things turn sour, as much as you love your wife, if she hates your guts, you're probably sleeping with your enemy now. And hell hath no fury like the wrath of a woman who has been scorned or who is angry, intensely angry. So there are certain things that he can do to protect himself, to set up. One of the things I recommend is if it's that sour, he might want to go ahead and initiate a petition for legal separation himself. That keeps the marriage intact, where the parties are both still married, but certain automatic restraining orders issue. And then the courts define the rights and the responsibilities of the parties, everything from parenting privileges to the financial obligations of each husband. But there's each person, husband, wife, but it's like a wall of protection has come up by the courts, or a red flag has been raised, so that anything she does after that, if she makes any allegations after that, he has the protections of saying, I have a legal separation court order, and these are the boundaries, and she's violated the boundaries. So he could file a petition for legal separation. I don't ever recommend that he move out of the house.
I was going to ask you about that. You recommend that he not?
No, I'm hoping that they're in the kind of home where if there's a lower level and an upper level, that he could move to the lower level or whatever, because once you move out of the home, you can be accused of abandonment and saying that you deserted your property rights, etc. So you don't want to have to run into that. That you make them aware that you're going through the situation, and ensure also that at all times that you're in a position where you've got a cell phone or something that you can record her if she comes after you as the aggressor. Those are the best things that you can think about doing to protect yourself. Okay. And vice versa for a woman. Those things could apply for a woman too.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we have someone calling?
Yes, we have somebody calling in.
Okay. Oh, my goodness, she's laughing.
No, we are actually, everybody knows that I'm trying to do the technology myself. I'm a studio in a bag. So,
yes, she is.
Everybody knows. So they just hit me up on, I'm lost slang. They just connected with me on Facebook.
They hit you up on
They
Facebook.
hit me up on Facebook.
Yes, we got to bring Mr. Weeks into the 21st century, right?
So they'll call back. When they call back, I'll get them right in. But that's a big. See, I like one of the things that I am. I'm a big caller. We got it. Okay, we're gonna do it this time. Thank you for calling A Sweeter Point of View. Hello. Oh, hello. Oh, we hear absolutely nothing but humming.
Hi, we'd love to talk to you. Say hi.
It's probably my wife. I told her I was at the library tonight.
We're still going to go with the library?
The library.
No, the library.
The library. Well, I'm going to hang up and hopefully they'll call back. But one of the things that I hold dear is that a lot of the men feel helpless, and especially when it comes to children nowadays, because they're afraid that the woman is taking the kids and not letting them see them. And I'm an advocate of knowing your rights when it comes to seeing your children. Can you please explain the difference between child support and visitation rights?
Well, they're two separate things.
And that's what
absolutely. And in fact, one of the things I say to men is strive to do everything that's possible to be involved in your child's life. Your child needs a daddy, needs a father, and as a daddy's girl myself, you just need to be involved regardless of how you feel about that woman. Now, if she's attempting to alienate you, there's some things that you can do to protect yourself. First of all, you need to request visitation privileges in writing. Send it by certified mail. Send more than one letter. Stop by to see the child if there's no violence issues. See if you can involve her parents in allowing you to see the child. But understand this, child support can be awarded pursuant to a paternity action. And a paternity action simply means that DNA tests have been done and you've been found to be the baby's daddy. As a baby's daddy, the fact that you have been established by DNA evidence as the daddy in a paternity action gives you no legal rights to visitation, to custody, to parenting privileges at all. I took this case all the way up to the Georgia Supreme Court. It's a case of Pruitt versus Lindsay. I litigated this case when I was single out of a case that came out of Desert Storm. Georgia law recognizes paternity for purposes of support, and they will make that man pay money, but he does not have the right to visit or to custody unless he files a petition to legitimate the child. A petition to legitimate simply says, I have been established as the biological father, and now I'm coming in to have you establish me, court, as the legal father, so that I have rights to visit my child and my child can inherit from my estate. Now, historically speaking, I've got a theory for why it was done that way under Georgia law.
What is that?
100 years ago, there were no DNA tests, and there were affluent men who were engaged in relationships with women, and they would have children out of wedlock.
You don't mean it.
And if, in fact, she could establish that he was the father, whether he was married with another family, whether he owned the plantation or not, he could be obligated to pay support and to have that child inherit from his estate. So the law in Georgia was written so that you could be found to be the father under a paternity action, but the child doesn't have the right to inherit from you unless you go in and give that child the right.
Is it still the law?
It's still the law.
Wow.
It's still the law. Well, federal law has now spoken on the issue. There's a case called Cox versus Social Security Administration that spoke on this issue after I took my case up to the Supreme Court in Pruitt versus Lindsay. And incidentally, Justice Robert Benham agreed with me in that case of Pruitt versus Lindsay. He said that a child, once paternity has been established, should have the automatic right to be legitimated if they petitioned the court for legitimacy. If the child said, I want to inherit from my daddy's estate, I want him to own me. or if the mother files it. Once biological paternity has been established, the child should have the right to inherit. That was my argument. The entire Georgia Supreme Court disagreed with me, except for Justice Benham. And he said that relegating a child to the status of bastardy by the very man who refused to legitimate the child is not fair for the child. But the law remains the same in Georgia, except there is federal law that now says that a child can be legitimated under federal law in an estate case if the child can go into that estate matter and prove he was my biological father. So, Joe, if you died and you have a child that's born outside of your marriage, that child, whether you legitimate that child or not, she can, upon your death, petition the probate court and says, here's my DNA test. He was my daddy, whether he legitimated me or not, and I want to inherit from his estate with the rest of his children.
I think that points out what men would say would be wrong. You never hear of women having to legitimate a child.
Because
Never.
it's mama's baby and daddy's maybe. Mama knows who it is.
Not necessarily.
Yes, she does. She gave birth to it.
It is wrong to make men do that and not require women to do
Well,
that.
when men can have babies, Joe, then men could be concerned about that issue. But since she had the baby, she knows it's hers.
Don't hit me.
I'm not mad.
She's doing violence.
Oh, you haven't
right
seen
now.
me mad yet.
No, it's just not fair that
men are making these laws. Men are having their fun, and they will have fun outside of their marriage and say, I'm going to keep this child hidden. And it's happened in this state. It's happened in the country, all over the world, especially during slavery. All these beautiful black women were having babies for all these plantation owners, and they were refusing to legitimate these babies because they didn't want them to get the plantation. I think the law should be retroactive. I think the law should be retroactive, that every woman who ever had a baby out of slavery, where she was forced to have it.
And for those people who don't know us, I'm the only black person in the room. I'm sitting here between two white chicks, and they're trying to get empathy for black. You don't know nothing about being black.
You sure don't. You don't.
What? What's the number?
It's funny, isn't it?
347.
Well, wait a minute. No, we're talking about men making more money, men making these laws, men making these rules. Let's look at the rationale behind the law. The only reason a law would exist that says, I am the biological father, but the child can't inherit, is where a man is deliberately and intentionally seeking to disown a child that he has had out of wedlock. You tell me where there is justice in that. There is none. And quite frankly, it's not even spiritually or biblically sound. If you don't provide for your own, you're worse than an infidel. And yes, I hit the table. If you're going to play, you better be willing to pay. Because if she comes to me, you're going to pay.
I think as a man, what we'd like is just put your menu up and see what it's going to cost for this service. Or, you know, this is a serious matter.
It is a very
I advise, this is absolutely true, I advise young men not to ever get married. I advise young men, when you're about 19, get you that vasectomy. Don't ever get married.
You know what?
Because you're going to get screwed.
You know why? Because you equate the value of life, like so many men do, to
Here we
money.
go. Here we
To
go.
money. But until you've really been loved, I mean that heart-rending, passionate, can never, ever get this woman, a man out of my head kind of love, then you value that against money. But anything worth having can never be bought with money, Joe. And that's what I've been trying to tell you for over a decade, brother. I've been trying to teach you this. You just don't get it. That's why you keep espousing this. Although, Danny, I think on the one hand, he has this deep longing inside to really experience experience what I'm talking about, or he's either pulling our leg all the time.
No. I mean, I've always hoped to find a man that I could feel that way. Maybe there's a listener out there.
Now you're being silly.
Maybe there's a listener out there.
539-5685 is the number.
Okay, so if anyone has a serious domestic question or a related question about how domestic issues can lead to criminal matters,
I did have
please
a question.
call in.
I did have the number to call is 347-539-5685, and we have about 15 minutes.
Trying to get me riled.
One of the things that I wanted to ask, I did have someone connect with me, and their question was dealing with their wife left. He was the man in the household. He cheated.
He cheated? Okay.
And the wife up and left with the child. And he has no way of getting in contact with them. When the wife literally goes and alienates the person, or the woman goes and alienates them, are there any rights besides going through, or does the man have to start from square one?
Well, a couple of things. The first thing is he may consider it worth the investment to hire an investigator to find her so he can get access to his child. If this child was born inside the marriage, he has every legal right to custody, visitation, etc. She doesn't have the right to take a child who was born in a marriage and alienate him from that child. In fact, under Georgia law, you could lose custody of your child if you continue to interfere with another parent's right to have parenting time and visitation with their child. That's the first thing. Secondly, I would ask him the question, when you, in fact, had an affair, did the two of you have marital relations after that? Many times a man will have an affair, but he and his wife will resume sexual relations. Under Georgia law, if in fact I were to have an affair, that's not going to happen, but if I did, I resumed marital relations with my husband and he agreed to it, we resumed conjugal relations, we were sleeping together again, we were having sexual intercourse. Under Georgia law, he cannot use my adultery against me. I have actually advised my clients, the law is very clear, the testimony of a spouse who talks about your adultery once they've had sex with you after the adultery is not admissible on the property issues or to cut against you on alimony or anything, because under Georgia law, they are deemed to have forgiven you if they had sex with you.
Interesting.
And if they forgive you, then the testimony can't be used against you in a court of law. Because under Georgia law, in a divorce situation, there has to be a continuing situation that led to fault and the deterioration of the marriage. I've actually advised clients who come into me who said, I cheated, but I want my marriage. Then I say, go home and make love to her as many times as you can, everywhere you can, as often as you can. Seduce her or him. Do whatever you have to do, and that evidence cannot be used against you in a court of law on the issue of adultery and property division. It may make you look like a bad person, but you could step up and say, she forgave me, we worked on it, she made me feel like everything was all right, and so in my opinion, she's now misrepresented her feelings to me, Your Honor, and now she has unclean hands too, even though you were the adulterer.
What I want to make sure that everybody understands here, this show by no means constitutes full legal advice.
You got it.
You have to contact someone that specializes, contact a family law attorney that specializes in this. Do not run next door and say, I got you. That was it. I know my rights. I heard it on a sweeter point of view, baby. Do not go off and do that, because I will say, depart from me, you workers of the day.
And understand this, you also get what you pay for. We're not entering into any attorney-client relationship with you by having this discussion. There's been no signing of a contract. There's been no consideration, and so you are expressly being told that you cannot act on anything that is being said. Is that right, Mr. Weeks?
He is just so enlightened about that first marriage contract.
No, I was just thinking, because I keep getting your biblical views mixed up with legal views.
No,
Isn't it true biblically that the adulterer is the woman that has sex with a married man? Isn't that in Leviticus?
Either a man or a woman can commit adultery.
I think biblically, I would be correct about that. So
about what?
About the fact that the adulterer is the unmarried woman having sex with a married man.
Yeah, I know.
It's
a lot of
Leviticus.
people think but that's not true. That's not true.
Oh,
Both a man and a woman can commit
I'm just
adultery.
trying to help you here spiritually.
I know you're not trying to help me spiritually.
He's trying to help his case.
I take help from a 3-year-old brother on spiritual matters before I listen to you. I've been trying for 10 years to get you to receive Jesus Christ.
Adultery got nothing to do with a married man.
It has everything to do with both. Biblically,
in the Bible.
It does. It does. I've had that discussion, and I don't remember where I found it in the Bible. But
in Leviticus, I'll tell you.
Okay.
And maybe the only part I know.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
He specifically looked.
You're wrong.
He can go to the part that people threw out of the Bible to find that, and he will put it back in there to substantiate what he believes.
Well, it's interesting because you have given me a lot of information tonight, seriously, that I did not know. Let me ask you this. It is a common perception.
You are saying it.
Oh, you hear it? Yes.
It is a common perception that cousins cannot marry, and that may be something that shouldn't be done, but is it not true in Georgia there's no prohibition against cousins?
Here we go.
Right.
Here we go.
I think I'm right.
If you're trying to marry your family off and keep all your money in your family.
I can say that when I was interning briefly on the Court of Appeals, I did have a case, and I don't remember what it was, that came up, and there are actually cousins in the mountains of Georgia who marry each other. Now, I'm not aware.
For you, John.
I'm not aware.
I've looked it up, and I think I'm right about that. And
Why
I think
are we looking up
I've never
married
gotten that question. Are you interested in marrying your cousin?
That's what I'm
my
trying to
sister,
say.
actually. I love
Yeah,
my
that
sister.
is against the law.
Yeah, it is, and aunts and nephews and so forth, but cousins are not prohibited.
I think there are generational statutes.
Let me ask you a question.
We got time for one more question.
This is a topical question.
Yes.
When a woman is divorced and gets alimony, and then she lives with another man, typically her alimony is terminated. What if she begins living with another woman sexually? How does that affect her alimony?
You are amazing. You come up with these interesting questions.
I don't know if I want to put that in there.
Here's what I say. You said typically. Typically, when she begins a relationship with another man, her alimony automatically terminates. That's not necessarily true anymore.
Okay.
Generally, most lawyers now anticipate termination of the alimony, and there's specific grounds that are set forth in any final judgment and decree that says when the alimony would terminate, and sometimes it actually inaugurates and uses that as a trigger. And because there are now same-sex relationships, most lawyers now, we include that language in final judgments that say if there's a same-sex relationship that's of a sexual nature, then the alimony could terminate. However, how do you really prove what people do behind closed doors?
Facebook.
I got, you see people that have gaydar. I got
media.
freaky-dar. I can tell how freaky somebody is by just kind of talking to them.
Okay, this conversation is deteriorating to the point that I'm going to turn off my mic.
No, don't turn off your mic. We got about
Joseph Ashley
minutes.
Weeks.
Can you
stop it? You're supposed to be giving these people some legitimate information.
This is a question that comes up in Decatur, Georgia.
It is a question of now. This is my.
Well, let me just say, Georgia doesn't recognize same-sex marriage,
right?
And because Georgia doesn't, any time that there is a same-sex couple who lives together, they may have the very same issues in terms of property distribution or family violence as a couple who's married, a heterosexual couple.
Right.
Under Georgia law, you have to file what is called a petition to partition property if, in fact, it is a same-sex couple, because they can't file for divorce in Georgia because they can't be recognized as married under Georgia law. So the petition to partition property actually does the same thing that you would do in a divorce action. It equitably divides the property based upon the facts and the scenario. But in terms of the domestic violence aspects of that, the law doesn't differentiate under the domestic violence statute. If you commit violence against a partner, then that partner, who's considered to be a family member, could potentially file a domestic action against you. Now, these are areas of the law that are still being tested under Georgia law. And I'm not familiar with any case that's on the books right now where a same-sex couple actually filed a petition for domestic violence. I do know that they do file petitions to partition property when they're going to break up. And they buy houses together, cars together, credit together, and all of those things. So the property issues have to be addressed.
Okay, we got about 2 minutes, about a minute and a half. My first question is, and then I want you to tell everyone how they can reach you, where you're located, because you have 2 different locations. But my question basically is that in domestic situations, whether same-sex or not same-sex, what is one of the common things that you see when children are involved, when the parent has split from, the opposite sex, and then they engage into a same-sex relationship? What is one of the biggest issues that you see when children are involved?
Excellent question, and I've actually seen that. First of all, let me say that I'm so thankful that in Georgia courts now there is a mandatory children coping with divorce seminar that parents have to attend when they're getting divorced and their children involved. It's a mandatory class. So you have to go to this course, and there's a minimum fee involved, but both parents have to go so that they can see this from a child's perspective and the pain that this child is going through and what this disruption is going to cause. So that is a good thing. With regard to someone going from a heterosexual marriage into a same-sex relationship, I can tell you most often that is going to create a custody issue, because there's going to be a custody battle and dispute as to whether or not that is consistent with the values and the principles in terms of raising the child that the parents would have done together. Now, if in fact there's a custody battle, I can't say the scales are balanced against one person or the other. I can say that the test that the court's going to use is what is in the best interest of the child. And what a good lawyer does is seeks to have the professional experts come in, the psychologist, the therapist, the guardian ad litem, the attorney that may have been retained to represent the children, to talk about the impact that this lifestyle change will have on the children. And then a reasonable and unbiased judge is going to make a decision based on what's in the best interest of the child. But it would be naive to think that in any divorce situation, a child is not going to be negatively impacted. They are. As to whether or not it's more traumatic when they're going into a same-sex couple relationship, I can tell you that I've seen some very well-adjusted children where now in the same-sex relationship, where there were 2 women now living together who had custody of the child, and the father was involved in this child's life, and it was okay with him that she was in a same-sex relationship. And they were raising, these children with what seemed to be a unity as parents. However, in terms of the impact of that long term, nobody can really know unless the child has advocates.
Well, Miss Alice Rodriguez, we had a call coming through, but we're not going to be able to take that. Can you tell us, Joe Weeks,
9 seconds.
In Avondale Estates, everyone, Avondale Estates, Georgia, 404-296-1444 is the number with which to reach him, or how to reach Joe Weeks. He is a practicing attorney.
Yeah, I'm really a trial lawyer and handle predominantly personal injury cases, but I do some general practice as well.
Okay, and Super Alice, can you
6 seconds.
got about 30 seconds so we can do a closeout.
Well, I can be reached at 866-651-1927, 651-1927, or at another location at 678-701-7630. 678-701-7630. I keep a Fayetteville office. I come to Avondale Estates, where Mr. Weeks allows me to have some space with him whenever I need it. And then I have a downtown location, so I strive to meet my clients in areas that are convenient.
If you want to get in contact with Alice or Joe, you can always reach us on Facebook on A Sweeter Point of View or My Sweet Danny J. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been yet another great, awesome Sweeter Point of View Legal Wednesdays. Please remember, everyone, that the world we see around us is
10 seconds.
a reflection of how we see our inner selves. If you would like to experience a sweeter life, it must first begin with a sweeter point of view.